My name is Linda Maxwell. I'm 66 years old, recently retired from a public library where I worked for over 30 years. I have one son, a grandson I adore, and until recently I believed I had a husband who loved me. It was December 27th, and the house was silent. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of lukewarm coffee, still wondering why no one had called or visited on Christmas Day. I told myself it was probably a mix-up, that maybe something came up at the last minute. 2 days had passed, and still nothing. No call from my son Adam, no text from Chelsea, my daughter-in-law, not even a vague check-in from Greg, my husband, of over 4 decades. I felt like a ghost in my own life, floating through rooms filled with quiet, trying not to overthink. I decided to send a simple text, just a quick message to Chelsea to ask if there had been a change in plans, or if they were still thinking about getting together for New Year's. I tapped out a short message, warm and friendly. Hope you all had a lovely Christmas. Just wondering about New Year's plans. Let me know if I should bring anything. Her reply came in less than a minute. It was short. Too short. She said they had gone to Mexico. Just her, Adam and Greg. She added one more sentence. Only the ones who really matter, you know. I froze. My fingers went numb. I read it again and again, trying to make the words mean something else. I wanted to believe it was a typo, a bad joke, anything other than what it actually was. Greg had gone to Mexico without telling me. My own husband. Adam, too. The 3 of them had packed their bags, boarded a plane, and spent Christmas on a beach somewhere without even thinking I should know. And Chelsea had the nerve to say it was only the people who mattered. I sat there, staring at the phone screen while my mind tried to catch up. I felt something heavy press down on my chest, like I couldn't get enough air. The silence in the room got louder. I wasn't angry yet. That would come later. Right then, I was nothing but stunned. I looked around my kitchen. The holiday decorations were still up. The wreath I'd bought weeks ago. The unused table setting for 4. The cinnamon rolls I'd made from scratch on Christmas Eve. I had saved them in case someone stopped by. No one did. I had spent the holiday alone, still believing they'd show up, still believing I was part of their lives. And in one text message I learned I wasn't. I had been erased, quietly, casually, as if I didn't matter, and the worst part was they didn't even try to hide it. Looking back, I realized the signs were there all along. They didn't come at me like a storm. They came slowly in whispers and glances, in little shifts that seemed harmless until they weren't. Greg had retired 2 years ago, but last fall, he suddenly got busy. He told me he was consulting part-time, helping a few old clients with taxes and estate planning. I didn't question it much, even when he started staying out later than usual and brushing off my offers to help. One morning, I offered to pack him lunch like I used to, and he laughed it off, saying he'd just grabbed something quick with a client. I should have known. Greg hates eating out unless it's somewhere fancy, and he always prefers my food, but I let it go. I didn't want to seem suspicious or clingy. Adam used to call me every Sunday. It was our thing. He'd update me on work, ask about my garden, even tell me about little things like traffic or movies he and Chelsea had watched. Then the calls got shorter, less personal. Sometimes Chelsea would answer his phone and say he was busy. I told myself he was just overwhelmed. New house, a demanding job, a young child. Life gets hectic. But the warmth in his voice faded. He stopped asking how I was doing, stopped ending calls with "love you, Mom." Chelsea had always been a bit cold, but lately it shifted. She began making offhand comments about my memory. Little things like, "Didn't we already talk about that?" Or maybe you just forgot Linda. Once she joked about getting me one of those medical alert buttons in case I got confused and locked myself out of the house. I laughed with her. I actually laughed. I didn't want to admit how much it stung. I told myself she was just trying to be helpful. Maybe I was reading too much into it. Maybe I really was becoming forgetful. Then there was Thanksgiving. We always hosted. This time they showed up late saying the traffic had been awful. But their car was spotless, no sign of a long drive. They brought a fancy dessert from a bakery, not the usual pumpkin pie we made together. And Chelsea kept glancing at Greg with this smug little look, like they were sharing an inside joke. I remember catching them whispering in the living room while I cleared the table. When I walked in with coffee, they went quiet. Greg said they were just talking about the weather. I nodded and poured the coffee, pretending not to feel the cold in the room. In early December, I mentioned our wedding anniversary. 42 years. I'd been thinking we could have dinner at the same restaurant where we celebrated our 30th. Greg brushed it off. He said maybe we should just stay in this year, keep it simple. Then Chelsea added that too much excitement might be a lot for me these days. That was the moment. I felt something deep inside me tighten, but I smiled and nodded. I didn't want to argue. I didn't want to be a burden. All these moments, all these tiny betrayals, I saw them. I felt them. But I didn't want to believe them. I thought love meant giving the benefit of the doubt. I thought family meant patience, trust. What I didn't realize was that love without respect becomes a blindfold. And I had been walking in the dark for far too long. The day after I got that text, I sat at the dining table with my laptop and a stack of old folders. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, just that something inside me had shifted. The hurt was still there, but something colder had started to take its place. I logged into our joint bank account first. The balance was lower than I expected. There were unfamiliar charges from weeks earlier, some large transfers I didn't remember approving. That's when I remembered the papers Greg had handed me in September. He said they were updates to our will, nothing urgent, just something the lawyer needed signatures on. I signed them without reading. I always had. That's what decades of trust do, it dulls your instincts. I dug through our file cabinet and found the copies. Among the estate documents were 2 authorization forms. One added Adam as a secondary on a savings account. Another allowed Greg to act on my behalf for investment withdrawals. My hands started to sweat, but I kept reading. The dates lined up. 1 week after I signed $20,000 had been transferred to Adam's account. It had been labeled a gift, but I hadn't known. I hadn't even been told. I opened another account, my retirement fund. I'd managed that account for years, growing it carefully. It was still intact, but there was a pending inquiry from Greg's financial advisor. He had requested information about rolling it into a joint investment. I stared at the screen, realizing just how close I'd come to losing control of everything. The house, the savings, my future. And for what? So they could take a vacation without me. No, this wasn't about a trip. This was a plan, a quiet one, a cruel one. They had been trying to ease me out of my own life, one signature at a time. I had spent years, and now I understood I was the safety net they had decided they no longer needed. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't send angry texts or demand explanations. I simply opened a new account in my name only and started moving the money. The process was almost surgical. I transferred every dollar from our joint accounts one by one, confirming each transaction with care. I updated my passwords, locked down my online banking, and made a list of every account they might still try to access. Next, I called my lawyer, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. She remembered me right away. I asked for a full review of our legal documents with a special focus on anything Greg might have altered or tried to manipulate. Her voice sharpened as I explained what had happened. By noon, I had revoked Greg's financial power of attorney. I filed paperwork to remove Adam as a beneficiary on certain accounts. I created new documents that were named after no one but me, and I placed alerts on every financial institution we had ever dealt with. Then I called the bank. I asked the representative to freeze all credit cards that were linked to our joint profiles. He tried to confirm Greg's authorization. I told him Greg would no longer need access. It was clean, cold, controlled. I didn't leave a note or warning, no dramatic announcement, no confrontation, just silence. Let them find out when the cards stopped working and the balance showed 0. They thought I was a harmless old woman who wouldn't notice until it was too late. What they never understood was that I had been the one keeping everything stable all along. The money, the plans, the safety. It had always been me, and now I was taking it back. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. Sometimes the quietest moves are the most powerful. Sometimes the best revenge is simply reclaiming what was already yours. The first call came around 3 a.m. I didn't recognize the number at first, but I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later it rang again. This time I answered. Greg sounded out of breath, like he'd been pacing. He said something about the credit cards not working, the hotel asking for payment, and the bank acting strangely. I listened quietly, letting him talk himself into a corner. I asked him how Mexico was. He paused. Then he said it wasn't what I thought, that the trip was last minute, that Adam needed father-son bonding. I asked if Chelsea needed father-son bonding too. He started to deflect, saying I was blowing things out of proportion, that it was just a quick getaway, that they didn't mean to hurt me. I reminded him he had lied. He said he didn't lie, he just didn't mention it. I brought up the money, the 20,000 that disappeared from our savings. He got quiet. I told him I found the paperwork, the authorization I supposedly signed. He said it was meant to be a surprise gift for Adam that he thought I knew. I asked why the surprise required hiding documents in a file folder behind our taxes. Why did it require having me sign things without explaining them? His voice changed then. It got sharp. He asked what I had done, what had happened to the accounts. I told him calmly that I'd moved the money into new accounts in my name. The joint cards had been cancelled. That the house, the retirement accounts, the savings, almost all of it, were legally mine. He started to raise his voice. Said I had no right. Said it was cruel to leave them stranded in another country. I asked if it was less cruel than being left alone on Christmas without a word. He said I was being dramatic. I told him I was being precise. I told him what I had done was legal, traceable, and fully within my rights, that I had documents and a lawyer to confirm it. Then I asked the question I'd been holding on to. Why? Why go through all this effort to exclude me, to take from me, to make me feel like I didn't exist? He didn't answer right away. I could hear Chelsea in the background asking what was going on. Then Greg said something about me being tired lately, forgetting things. That maybe he thought I needed to step back from managing things. I laughed. Not loud. Just enough for him to hear the edge in it. I said the only thing I was forgetting lately was why I ever trusted him with everything I'd built. He asked if we could fix this when he got back. I told him he should think carefully about what fixing it meant. Those things had changed. That I had changed. He said we were still a family. I said families don't erase each other. Families don't steal. Families don't lie with smiles on their faces and fake concern in their voices. He didn't know what to say after that. I ended the call before he found a response. And for the first time since all of this began, I felt calm. Not whole, but calm. Like I had finally stepped out of the fog and could see things clearly. They came through the door like a wave of noise and tension. Suitcases hit the floor. Shoes scuffed the hardwood. Greg walked in first, followed by Adam, and then Chelsea, who didn't bother to hide her scowl. I didn't greet them. I didn't ask about the flight. I stood by the kitchen counter and told them to sit down. They hesitated, glanced at each other, but eventually did. I laid a folder on the table. Inside were printed statements, copies of the signed authorization forms, notes from my lawyer, and a summary of account transfers. I told them I wanted silence while I spoke. If anyone interrupted, the conversation would be over. I started with the bank records. The $20,000 transfer to Adam's account. A gift, they said. One I hadn't agreed to or known about. I pointed to the date and the signature mine from the stack Greg handed me back in September. I told them what the papers were really for. Not a will update, not estate planning, a quiet transfer of control. One more signature from a woman they thought had stopped paying attention. Greg opened his mouth, but I raised my hand. I moved on. The house deed. Still in my name. Always had been. The mortgage had been paid off using my inheritance, the down payment on Adam's first home, my retirement funds. I showed them the distribution of assets, 70% in my name, legally mine, financially mine. I had the documentation to prove it. I reminded them that I was the one who handled the bills, the planning, the taxes. Then I pointed out the pattern, the gaslighting, the subtle comments about memory, the quiet conversations behind closed doors. The vacation was planned without me. All of it pointed to the same conclusion they were preparing to push me aside. Greg looked down. Adam shifted in his seat. Chelsea crossed her arms. I looked at each of them. It was the truth delivered like a ledger. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just showed them who they had underestimated and what it cost them. Chelsea was the first to break. Her voice rose sharp and shaky as she accused me of always needing control. She said I made them feel small. I never trusted anyone to make decisions unless I approved first. Adam didn't look at me. He stared at the table, then quietly said, maybe they had felt boxed in, that I could be overbearing, that I sometimes acted like they couldn't handle things on their own. I didn't deny it. I told them I knew I had strong opinions, that I liked things done a certain way, but I also reminded them that I had always shown up. I had been there for every emergency, every bill, every missed deadline. I picked up the pieces so they wouldn't have to. I said if they had felt overwhelmed by me, they could have talked to me. If I had hurt them, they could have said something. What they did instead was build a plan behind my back, a plan rooted in silence and avoidance, not honesty. Greg tried to speak, but I kept my eyes on Adam. I asked if he ever thought about what it would feel like to be left out of Christmas, to find out through a text message that your family had moved on without you. He didn't answer. I looked at Chelsea next. I said I understood she wanted space, independence, a clear boundary, but manipulating someone into signing over assets isn't setting a boundary. It's erasing them from their own life. I told them this wasn't about me being difficult. This was about trust, and they had shattered it. Not with one action, but with a pattern. A quiet, steady push that led to exclusion, then control. I stood up and said I wasn't angry anymore, just clear. They had the right to feel what they felt, but they didn't have the right to take what was mine. And they definitely didn't have the right to rewrite the story of who I was without ever having the courage to talk to me about it. A week after the kitchen confrontation, I filed for divorce. I didn't make a scene or wait for anyone's permission. I walked into my lawyer's office, signed the papers, and let the process begin. Greg didn't fight it. He looked tired. Maybe he knew there was no coming back from this. I didn't feel bitter. I felt clean, like I had rinsed something heavy off my skin after years of pretending it wasn't there. I also told Adam that I wouldn't be offering financial help anymore, not out of punishment, but because it was time. I wanted him to grow into the man he was supposed to be. If he stumbled, that was his path to walk, not mine to cushion. Chelsea didn't reach out again, and I didn't expect her to. Some people only want you around when you're useful, and once they can't use you, they disappear. Then I booked a flight to Italy, a place I had always dreamed of visiting but never made time for. I rented a small flat in Florence for a month. I spent mornings walking cobbled streets and afternoons sipping espresso in cafes where no one knew my name. I felt anonymous in the best way. No one looked at me like I was a mother who failed a wife who didn't see it coming. I was just Linda, a woman standing in front of a Botticelli painting crying quietly because it was so beautiful, and she finally had time to notice. One afternoon I received a message from Adam. He didn't ask for anything. He just said he was sorry, that he hadn't seen how deep the hurt ran until it was too late, that he missed me. I wrote back. I told him I missed him too, that I forgave him. But I also told him something I had never said before. I want respect, not dependency. If we were going to rebuild anything, it had to be on new ground. He didn't reply right away. That was fine. I wasn't waiting. I took a train to the coast the next day. watched the sun set over the Ligurian Sea with a glass of wine in my hand. I thought about everything I had lost, but more than that, I thought about what I had finally found. Peace. Space. My own voice no longer wrapped in apology. I didn't have to fix anyone. I didn't have to prove anything. I was free. And that I realized was never a loss. It was a return. I used to think that being left out was the worst thing that could happen to someone. That silence, especially from the people you love most, could undo you, and for a while it did. But now, sitting in a quiet apartment overlooking the Arno River, I understand something else. Sometimes being left out is how you finally step back in, not into their world, into your own. They removed me from their lives, yes. But in doing so, they cleared the noise, the expectations, the roles I was never asked if I wanted to keep playing. And in that space, I found clarity. I found that I am not small. I am not fragile. I am not just someone's mother or wife or backup plan. I am a woman who survived betrayal, stood up in the storm, and chose to walk forward instead of breaking down. I didn't get closure from them. I gave it to myself. Not by winning or punishing, but by choosing peace over resentment, self-worth over approval, stillness over chaos. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt erased, overlooked, used, or left behind, let me tell you something simple. Their decision to leave you out may just be life's way of asking you to walk your own path. Fully, freely, on your own terms. I didn't lose a family. I lost an illusion. And in return, I got myself back. That's not a tragedy. That's a beginning.